we're doing over six figures a month in revenue, and we really focus again on, once we generate that revenue, spending it as effectively and wisely as possible so that we can generate a profit.
Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Top Music Attorney, Miss Krystle, and this is the Top Music Attorney Music Business Podcast. Today, I'm going to be chatting with James Rhodes. He is the co-founder of successful independent record label FiXT. Now, he's partners with Klayton, and Klayton has a number of very successful music projects, my favorite being Celldweller, and we'll talk about it a little bit. But just so you guys know, when I'm talking about this being a successful independent label, I'm so excited to get into really the weeds on operating, to scouting artists, to making real life money in the music business. But a little quick overview. FiXT was founded in 2006, and they've done some pretty great stuff. All right, so they've had, I think it's 3 billion streams online. They've had over 1,000 film, TV, game sync placements. And for those of you who are interested in getting into the sync world, it can be very lucrative, and this is a big part of what they do. So we'll be talking all about that. And then part of my favorite piece of this is their genre. So they are kind of in a little bit of a niche, and, I would call it kind of electronic, rock, synthwave, sci-fi, industrial-esque. That's, my word there. But we'll talk to James a little bit more about it. So I'm going to bring James in right now. Hello, James. Welcome.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
You got it. So look, I don't want to spend too much time on the backstory because anyone who searches you for 2 seconds will read this. So I'm going to very quickly go through it. You can correct me if anything is mistaken. You ready?
Yeah.
All right. So as a quick little just overview for James, he was originally a fan of Klayton, which I love. And, he joined Klayton's street team and eventually did a booking for Celldweller, right? Because he was a fan. He's like, come on out, let's do this. And, of course, Klayton in response is like, interesting. What else can you do? Totally what I do. So he ended up hiring James, and James takes over e-commerce, and he's crushing things. And I believe you ended up getting a job, this was 2005, with Klayton's manager at a sync licensing company, and that basically was just the blossom moment of the relationship, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Position Music in 2005. They have gone on to be a very highly successful sync company, label, publisher, management company. They're, nearing 40 people or something right now. And I was full-time employee number 2 back in 2005.
Amazing. Okay, so at this point, safe to say, we're about 17 years into this label, plus some time even before then, kind of getting your feet wet and doing all this stuff. So if you don't mind, I kind of want to just jump into it. Let's talk about the music business.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay, so I want to start with what would you kind of consider, the most successful aspect of the label and what you guys have done together?
So, we have had to evolve over different periods of time in the industry, being around as long as we have. So in the early days, it was very much merchandise, CDs, physical things. Digital downloads had a good run, and then we had to evolve into streaming. But really, currently, where we're at, streaming is our number one revenue driver. So Spotify is way out there in the lead. We embraced Spotify very early. I know a lot of artists, a lot of labels, industry people were very anti-Spotify and, the paltry per stream rates. We saw it as this is the way the consumers of the world are moving. And so we need to fish where the fish are. So we need to embrace this and get out and build an audience there. So we embraced streaming pretty early. Built up playlists, got our music into the ecosystem, writing the algorithms of the, Spotify, but multiple platforms. And so that has become a significant revenue driver. And then, parlaying that over into other areas where artists get discovered on Spotify. It is a good revenue stream for us, but then we're very direct to consumer. So we try to connect with them on socials, get them on an email list. sell them the merchandise still, and maximize that fan relationship.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so before you just took us in so many areas and my brain's exploding, but let's focus really fast. So you to say that a big portion of your guys' income is streaming is actually flooring to me, because I thought you were going to say because you guys focus so much on sync licensing, and obviously there's a whole conversation about, whether sync licensing opportunities have died down a little because now there's way more competition. But I mean, we don't get paid a ton for these streaming numbers. Yeah. So the fact that you guys that's pretty cool. And I would say that's a good success for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a big piece of our, monthly revenue is streaming revenue. It is a combination of streaming. It's still sales, some digital downloads, physical. We're selling CDs, vinyl, t-shirts. YouTube Content-I.D has become a significant platform for us. Right. Again, we early embraced YouTube Content-I.D. So we put our music in there, but then we told people, if you're making music or if you're making a video on YouTube and it's non-commercial and you're not trying to monetize it, use our music for free. Let us just claim the Content-I.D revenue on the back end. So instead of blocking people from using it, we actually created demand for it. And then some of those people went on to license music from us when they got to a point where they were wanting to monetize their videos, but now they needed to pay a license or an annual fee of some kind. But
I think that's creative. That's a creative solution for a lot of artists and creators. And, I don't know if you heard this, Grimes recently, she's like, hey, if anyone wants to use AI, right, to create music with my voice, just give me half. I'm totally cool with it, right? So being responsive to what's happening in the industry, smart.
Totally. So yeah, YouTube Content-I.D became a 6-figure a year revenue stream for us, just letting people use the music for free and then making that back end ad revenue. And then sync licensing revenue is a big piece for us. It has been a more substantial piece in earlier years where there was less competition, but it has gotten a lot tougher. So it's still a piece for us, but it's not nearly as significant as it used to be. Although we're actively working with a few new sync partners, and there's still a ton of money in that industry. So we're looking for new partners and maybe a new honeymoon period where we get that big explosive growth again.
Okay, so let me just real quick. So I had mentioned at the beginning they've had likely well over 1,000 placements in TV, film, games. And so some of the sexiest ones that I love include placements with Westworld, Power Rangers, Suicide Squad, Iron Man, RoboCop, my favorite, John Wick, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Call of Duty. So just really amazing. So now let's throw out some numbers. And the best high end, kind of placement for a movie trailer. I mean, what's the most you've ever gotten for a placement?
I mean, trailers can go for a huge range of prices. We've done many trailers for $30,000 and $40,000 a pop. And, sometimes they're going after, really, really big artists, and the quotes they're getting are for 150, 250,000. And sometimes the movie budget is like, well, we don't want to go pay 200,000 over here. But we'll pay 40,000 over here, and we're like, we'll take $40,000 for a placement all day long. Right. And as we're getting into some financials here, definitely want to throw out, we do 50-50 deals with all of our artists. So for every dollar we bring in, when we are recouped from any expenses, the profit is split 50-50.
Okay, and I want to just pause on that for a second, because being an artist-founded label and artist-driven, you guys make it a point to find great artists and to really get them to the best success that they possibly can. And you're literally doing that via your contracting, right? So, pretty standard label deal is going to be as low as 12%, meaning the artist's royalty that the artist gets is as low as 12%, sometimes up to 20% if it's, a really decent, successful indie artist. So you guys are doing 50-50. So you really walk the walk, talk the talk when it comes to trying to do right by artists.
We really do. And this comes from Klayton, the owner, Celldweller, Scandroid, Circle of Dust. He's had multiple successful projects, but on his history of working with labels in the 90s into the early 2000s, he had horrible deals, and he was sick of just, getting bent over the proverbial couch. And so we're like, we need to do something fair. So we've been 50-50 with our artists. His first deal in the 90s was a 92.8. So it wasn't even 10 or 12%. It was 8%.
All right, so then my question is, you start this label. I'm assuming you both aren't like pros in the music business and you know everything. I mean, you're figuring out as you go. Okay, so you decide to start it. You have a little experience. How the hell do you navigate and figure stuff out? What'd you do?
It was just passion and determination and the drive that we are going to figure this out as we go, having a growth mindset that we don't know everything, but we know that we don't know everything. So we're not going to assume we've just figured this out. It's continually evolving. So when we first started, it was the two of us. And when we started, I wasn't thinking I was going to manage the company. I was really thinking I'm just going to be employee number one with Klayton. And then as we started adding more staff, it's like, well, I understand how all this works, so I'll oversee them. And then over 17 years, it's like, oh, now I'm the vice president. I'm a label executive, and we've got 15 people, departments, staff under us. So it's just been a day at a time, getting things better, learning, lots of reading, going to conferences, industry mentors, learning from people that have done some of this ahead of us.
Yeah.
But a lot of it we've just figured out as we've gone.
And that's how it goes for anyone who's watching this. Having some mentorship and watching some resources and reading books and this and that is great, but you learn the best through execution, and everyone's path is going to be a little different. So something that I really love about FiXT in general is their structure. So they are a full service record label, but they're also a music publisher and they're a merchandise company. So we talk all the time, and sometimes, record labels might get a bad rap and they're just so money hungry. And I'm like, yeah. Every artist should have a mindset of being a music business like a record label, because we're focused on how do we take the creative, get it to as many people, and make as much money as possible. So you guys have structured your company in a certain way. So, for example, when it comes to the publishing, not all labels will take any kind of ownership or control over publishing. So why did you?
So that was really a key strategy for us. And it was maybe even less intentional at the very beginning, because Klayton was working with Position Music, who was Klayton's manager, and they're a publishing and sync company.
Okay.
And so from day one, we just understood the value of representing both the master and the publishing. And then also realizing that if you can build your catalog as a one-stop where you have both rights under the same roof, there's a lot of opportunity for licensing things easily, where they can have easy clearance with partners. So we often get companies that come to us or the companies that represent us, and these music supervisors have, a 24-hour or less deadline. And if they have to go chase down a publisher in the UK or Germany or wherever in the world, or multiple publishers, and they're on a tight deadline, it's like they've got 3 or 4 calls to make and clear multiple negotiations, or they can talk to one person and clear it all. Even if they really like the song, a lot of times they're like, it's not worth the hassle of having to go clear this. They'll replace it and take a different song that they can clear easily.
Yeah, so James is talking about one stop, making sure you have all rights. So, for example, if an artist is considering, well, I just need a publisher, and I should have multiple publishers, you're saying that's actually probably not a good thing.
So there's definitely people that have made a successful career out of working with different labels, different publishers, multiple publishers. We see that as extra friction, and see that from some clients when they're coming to clear things, that they don't want to. Some clients, especially if you're dealing with indie films, indie video game developers, they might not even fully understand what all the clearance really is. They're just building a game or just filming an indie passion project. They might not even understand what actually a sync license really is, and that there's master rights and publishing rights. So when they come to us, and like we have some artists that do cover songs, we could clear the master, but they're going to have to go clear the original publisher for that cover. Right. And that just, blows their mind sometimes, like, oh, I have to go talk to somebody else. And it's usually a short convo like, oh, well, we'd rather just license something directly from you that we can clear easily.
Yeah, make it easy, people. That's what we're saying. So, FiXT claims that its average roster artist sees a 350% growth rate on their Spotify monthly listeners within 1 year. Okay, so tell me, how do you do this for your artists?
It probably sounds a lot less sexy than it really, it sounds a lot less sexy than it is. Yeah. We have a consistency formula where it's about being out there, releasing music consistently. And instead of
Meaning once a month, meaning once a week, what's consistently for you?
So as often as is sustainable. So we do have artists that are at different places in their life where they may be making a run at being a full-time musician. They might have a day job and they're just making music on the side, aspiring to become a full-time musician. They might, have a new baby and they're taking care of a family. So it really does come down to sustainability. We don't
He's
want
so nice. I love how you're like, we dictate this based on their lives. And I'm like, the answer I was expecting you to say is, I need one a month and it has to be this, it has to be that.
We want that. I mean, yes, ideally we want something every 3 to 4 weeks,
Okay.
but we're not, whipping, snapping the whip behind any of our artists.
Right.
It is about sustainability because artists burn out and, they're already, they've got all the demands of life and, social media and fans and all these other things that they have to interact with. There's a lot of pressure on artists to be, super active on TikTok and all these social media platforms. And, we encourage that and we support that, but we're also really mindful of not burning artists out. And we want to be here for the long term. So I think over 17 years, something that has set us apart is we've seen labels pop up, artists pop up that in the short term look like they're way bigger and more successful than us. And then they burn out and it's like, oh, that artist burned out 5 or 6 years ago. We're still here. We're on a slower growth curve, but you look back after 17 years and now we're way further down the field.
Okay, so with the strategy, let's say in the ideal situation, you have someone who has the ability to like push out something every 3 to 4 weeks. Now, some people might argue, well, that's not ample enough time in between to promote on social. So is the strategy not so much to push from socials to music platforms? It's really about honoring the, Spotify algorithm and providing the new release. Because if someone's releasing some song that goes out to nothingness and then they release another thing that goes out to nothingness, is that really going to help them?
So, we, as a label, we have built out at least a baseline of our label playlists, with, multiple thousands of followers on them. And we continue to promote them. We run ads to them periodically where we know if we're putting out music from an artist, even if it's a brand new artist that's unknown, there's going to be some amount of traffic through just our ecosystem and our existing fan base that they're going to get some listens, some spins, some streams. And then, to your point, there is a time when we're looking at an artist, depending on the size of the artist, what else is going on? Do we have a music video? Do we have other things happening? Are they going on tour? So it may be, maybe we're not pushing something every 3 to 4 weeks, even if we have it. Maybe we are extending some time in between. We have seen, for example, with a few artists where we pushed a single out, it got on a multiple huge Spotify editorial. And we're like, okay, that's awesome. Like 6 weeks later, we dropped another song and it hit no playlists, but Spotify kept that original song on these playlists. And we're like, oh, like they really believe in this song. They're not ready for the next one. So then we waited like 2 more months before we dropped another song because we're like, let's ride out and see how far Spotify keeps these on. And then at some point they dropped off. Then we responded with another song and we hit a bunch of playlists again.
Okay.
So
now oh, good.
No. Yeah. Just, responding to the DSPs, if you see activity could affect what we're doing. Other times it is just about, kind of feeding the machine, driving that content in there. If it is hitting nothing, then it's like the algorithm can't really spin up. But if we're getting some traction and then you follow it up, it kind of does build a little bit of a snowball effect. And we've noticed, I don't have any concrete proof to back this, but just an observation. And sometimes with all of the data that we have access to, all we can do is just make an observation and then iterate on things. But we've noticed on multiple occasions, we release a new song from an artist now, something they had in their back catalog that's been out for a while. If we have a new song hit Release Radar on Friday, the following Monday on Discover Weekly, which is another big Spotify algorithmic playlist, one of their back catalog songs gets like a significant increase in push out. So we have seen Spotify seems to reward artists that are consistent.
I see what you're saying. Okay, now you had mentioned running ads, intermittently when needed. Now, let's talk about that. So running ads used, for example, on Facebook, right? Still pretty inexpensive. You can reach a ton of people. But the problem was that you got punished if you were pushing traffic off of the platform, ad or not. So as far as when you guys run ads, what's your method to madness? Are you just doing it on Spotify? I forget what they call it. But where are you running your ads?
Facebook and Instagram through the Facebook ad manager is still our number one platform for running ads.
And you're getting conversions? You're getting people to actually
we're getting enough traffic and enough traffic when we're sending people to Spotify that it's worth it. We are also selective on what placements within the ad product we place. So it's like we turn off, the right hand little sidebar thing. Like we found that placement didn't really seem to work. But in the news feed, there's a whole list of like 20 different places that your ads can show up, and we narrow those down to 5 or 6, and we only let our ads run in places that we feel are going to be effective.
Because I think that the ones where they're pre-rolls, right, so they interrupt the viewer's experience, those usually aren't received so well.
We turn those off.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
The Instagram swipe up is probably the best one. So you get them while they're on Instagram, and if it's an easy swipe up right into Spotify, that seems to convert the best.
And then as far as when you're looking at which ads, so, my method to madness for my content, what I do as an artist is we will have like 20 different pieces of content to just see what works the best. Sometimes we look at organically, and that just tells us what we need to know. But if we are doing little tests through ads, we'll do super casual stuff in the car, singing along, versus more higher production things from the music video. So in your experience, do you find that there's more success with the more casual stuff or the more high production pro?
So we have traditionally only been doing, as far as ads, the high production stuff. So with, the whole short form video, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Reels, that has really opened up this more casual lane of content. And we have a bunch of artists that have been doing well and starting to get some virality out of that side of things. We have a very produced brand for the label. And so we really haven't leaned too far into that more casual content, although that'll probably come at some point. We're going to be starting our own podcast and doing more video content. We do monthly calls with our artists where we record videos and we're taking clips of video. I think as we get that further up to speed, there's really not going to be much risk to our brand if we start also doing more casual stuff, because it's like we've already established that we can do really high produced pieces of content.
Yeah, well, and just, it's tough sometimes with ads because you just never know what's going to work. And do you have maybe just a set test that you do for your different releases? Because you don't want to hemorrhage money, right? Between 30 plus artists that you represent and releases coming out, even if it's like $100-$200 on a test, that's still $200 per person,
we start when we're like, hey, we're going to, run an ad on something. We usually start with $25, $50. We start pretty conservative. And sometimes it's like, just within that spend, you can tell, like, is this doing anything? If not, you either let the 25 or the 50 spend and that's it. Or sometimes it's even like, man, we got $20 into this $50 spend. We're just going to kill it because we're going to waste the other 30. So we back to sustainability and doing a 50-50 profit split with artists. We really care about preserving margin and that there is profit left. So there's no sense in wasting money just for the sake of spending money. We might set a marketing budget. We start out running something. If it's not working, let's turn it off and give the artist an extra payout because we had some profit there or something. So we think a little bit differently than a lot of artists that come to us from other labels, or when we talk with other labels. A lot of other labels spend a lot more money than we do,
Yeah.
and we're a lot smaller than those labels. But then you go look at our artists, and our performance is on par with a lot of those. So, we think there could be a better way.
Yeah, and I just, what I've found with my own career, with my own label, is just not to dump money unnecessarily, because we, early in the careers, we always feel if I just got an investor to put $100,000 into my project and I put it into ads, everyone would know how wonderful I was and I would take off. And what they don't know is that you actually have to do lots of testing even before you do the $25 test. It's really smart to see what is performing well organically. If people are responding like, shit, if I just pour a little gas on this fire, I know the ad will do that much better.
I prefer to let things start organically whenever possible, so that we have a true gauge on what the response actually is, versus if we start out with an aggressive ad spend right on day one, we're like, well, is this doing well just because we were spending money, or was there traction here based on the content itself? And sometimes knowing the difference there is key, because if you have a false sense of this is doing really well because of some, ad spend or marketing gimmick or something, then you come to the table and you dump a bunch more resources in. And then if it falls flat, it's like, oh, I thought there was something here, but it was a false sense of traction.
Okay, so in the kind of, we're talking about the algorithm, and let's talk about juicing the algorithm for a second. I'm just going to say it. You can agree with me or not. Don't pay for fake plays. Don't fake for, it knows. Yep. Stuff. It's going to punish you, and you will have a very hard time recovering. So let's get that out of the way. When it comes to encouraging the algorithm, let's talk about pre-saves. I have some people who are like, in the marketing community, don't do a huge push for pre-saves. You're just, it will help on the day of, because then it, shows more people played and listened to it. That's great. But at the end of the day, you're wasting your effort doing that versus just once it's out, pushing super hard on social. So what do you guys do?
We do have a pretty standard rollout where we make pre-saves available, but I would say I'm probably a bit more skeptical of how much they're really doing, and more about giving the artist sometimes something extra they can be talking about to kind of pre-hype it. I don't know that the pre-saves themselves are triggering much, but that there is some awareness because they're talking on socials that people are now anticipating it. So yeah, I'm not crazy about the effectiveness of pre-saves, but it feels like it just gives you a little something to do.
Yeah, and I think all day long, there are artists who will tease stuff for like months and then they drop it. That's still good because it's generating excitement and interest, and that's all good. But, quite frankly, it's a pain in the ass as a fan to pre-save, because you always have to log in and put in your stuff, and no one wants to do that. So you're asking a lot of your community. So the thought process from marketing people, be it right or wrong, is fine, do a pre-save, but really if you're going to have a big ask for someone and they're busy and they have other things to do, just ask them to go listen to the song when it goes live. All right, so I meant to cover this early on in the conversation, but obviously you guys have done big things, so you're making big money. Can you tell us generally on a monthly kind of basis, are you in the six figures, the multiple six figures? What are you guys doing?
So yeah, we have built things up, after all these years and revenue streams. We're doing over six figures a month in revenue, and we really focus again on, once we generate that revenue, spending it as effectively and wisely as possible so that we can generate a profit. And if you think about, some of those figures can sound big, but, half of that's going out the door. Then we have a 15-person staff to pay overhead for, and salaries and rent and, office and equipment. So, that money can go really quickly, but, we're definitely fortunate that we've built up a revenue model where we have consistent money coming through between streaming and, we're continually, releasing new merchandise. We have new merch going up pretty much every week. So there's across our roster, there's a new merch drop. So there's a constant influx of fans coming through buying new merchandise. It takes a village.
Yeah, and from the standpoint of being a music business owner, a record label, there are those hard costs, and especially if you are excited as an artist to work with a big company, if there's a decent team, and you're going to get these 10, 15 people to work for you, you have to keep that in mind that now this is a business that has to survive and pay rent. And so, this is where I think record labels have gotten a bad rep because, they take gambles on artists that they hemorrhage money on and they never recoup. And that's just kind of how it goes. So let's talk about that for a second. When you sign an artist, are you looking for someone who already has a little bit of juice going, some fandom? Or, are you taking people out of obscurity because they're just so talented? Because it means more money and work for you, depending on where they're at.
It's traditionally been the latter of that. It's finding obscure, undiscovered talent that we think is just really special and unique and building it. Multiple artists in our history we've taken from, zero, where we just found out about it. It was an artist that maybe was in a previous band. They're starting something new. So their profiles are literally zero when we're starting and building that to, 100, 150, 200,000 monthly listeners. We had, multiple artists where they had started, to use the Spotify monthly listener metric, they were 250 monthly listeners or 2,500 monthly listeners, and we've taken them to 200, 250,000 monthly listeners. So that type of growth has been the majority of what we've done. And then in the last couple of years, as we have, got a little bit more clout and reputation for doing what we do, we've started signing some bigger artists where they've already got some traction. So there was an artist, Fight the Fade, that was at about 150,000 monthly listeners. When we signed them, that was our biggest artist ever at the time of signing. And then we've taken them to 350,000. So, still a nice growth ramp for them. And then we've got, a couple of current projects we're working on where we're starting to look at, the average artist we're signing be more in that 100 to 150,000 as more of a baseline. But then we say that and we still find something that's really special and it's got, 5,000, 10,000, and it's, we still have a heart for developing things.
Okay. And that's amazing. Okay. So then let's talk about as you are looking at talent, right? So, as far as scouting and seeking out, right? Because you have inbound, you have people who are going to be kind of submitting stuff and I'd love to work with you and I'm sure you'll consider them and have a process for that. When it comes to outbound, talk to me about your process. Are you looking on social media? Are you DMing artists? What do you do?
So we have, we're an artist-owned label. So Klayton is still, the ultimate tastemaker for if it's going to be something we sign, it has to hit his bar of, what the sound is, the quality, and there's something unique and special. So everything ultimately flows through him, but we have a full-time A&R manager. So we have Dave Hansen, who's based out of Chicago, and his job, outside of working with the artists already on our roster and coordinating and communicating a bunch of things with them, a big piece of his job is searching outbound. And Spotify, we keep coming back there. It has been just a game changer with all, hundreds of millions of users on the platform, generating so much data and artists that associate with artists and just playlist culture that you can go down these rabbit holes and find really unique things.
Oh,
And
interesting.
it's
So like you'll look at a playlist and kind of reverse engineer maybe someone who's on that.
a lot of
Okay.
deep diving there.
Okay.
Over the years, literally utilizing Spotify Discover Weekly playlists personally has led to us finding a few artists. So the artist The Annex, which is on our roster, I discovered one of his songs on my Spotify Discover Weekly. We thought that he was really cool. We were looking for a remixer for a project. We reach out and got a remix, started talking with him, and all of a sudden realized like, oh, maybe we're a label fit. And then it turned into a label conversation. Remixes have been a unique thing for us. We do a lot of remixes. There are a lot of fans who don't love the remixes, but they have been a pretty successful strategy for us. They are another way to cross-promote one artist to another artist fan base.
Right.
It's a way to keep activity back to sustainability. When an artist is done with the cycle and they're not ready to release new music or write new music, getting remixes of stuff that's already out keeps activity for socials and for streaming platforms. But then it's also let us really test out working with artists, where we've had over the years a number of artists where we initially approach them about a remix. We get to see what they're like working with, what their quality is, what their personality is, and then that can naturally lead to, well, maybe we should do more together.
Okay, and that was my follow-up question, which is, what's the criteria? So you find someone, they have interesting music, great music or whatever. That's not the only thing you care about. So your criteria on, is it a work ethic thing? Because you have said previously that, building the culture of Fix took years. And so there's a very particular culture that you have. So talk to me about that.
Yeah. So, internally, just our staff and team, it has taken years and years to get our culture right. We have gone through a lot of growing pains, but we have really dialed that in the last few years, where we've identified, a very, core mission, vision, company values. We start all of our, monthly staff meetings. We have monthly artist webinars. We start all of those with our mission and values. And so we've really ingrained that. But it's not just something we recite in those meetings, but we really try to live those out. And so also working with artists, we want artists that have similar values, that they're a value and culture fit for us. And we've talked to many artists over the years where working with a label or just being a musician was a stepping stone for them to reach something else, a lifestyle, sex, drugs, and rock and roll or whatever. And our response to that is, then we're not the label for you. We don't want to deal with drama and egos, and we don't want our staff to go home at night and be stressed out because of the interactions they're having to step on eggshells around those things. So we want to work with people that we enjoy being with, and we really treat our roster and our staff like a family. And like I said, we do these monthly calls and we all get on, and it feels like a family where we're all just like hanging out and chatting.
Yeah, and it's almost reiterating the sentiment of, I want artists to be in a mindset of being their own businesses, whether they sign with a label or not. It's a partnership. And so the hope is that you, as an artist, you are hustling and building your own thing, and then you find someone who's going to help with what you already are doing really well. And that's basically what you're saying. Don't come in here and be like, hey, I'm drunk, I'm not showing up to this, I'm not delivering that. That's just not going to be good for anybody.
Right.
Okay. So then let's transition a tiny bit, because you're talking about, company culture, and, when it comes to managing a 15-person team or even a 5-person team, with more help comes more problems. So, first and foremost, did you learn early on the importance of contracts? Do you have contracts with everyone for everything?
Yeah, we have been pretty meticulous on that front. Only gotten increasingly more meticulous as we continue to grow. We certainly have things from early days that were probably, not sufficient, and those things. But, typically anything we do has some sort of contract or agreement, which you would think would be standard. But we talk to, again, artists and other industry people all the time. And we talk to artists that send music to a label thinking they're just submitting it for them to consider. They never sign anything, and then they see this label put their music up on DSPs, like with no communication. Like that happens out there. So we do, proper agreements with our artists, and we really want to make sure they understand what they're signing. So education and willingness to get on a call and talk through what do these things mean.
Yeah. And just a general little note for other, record label owners who are watching this, it's really a good practice to encourage every artist that you work with to get an attorney. And it's not because, you want to make them more difficult for yourself or anything like that. It not only better protects you that they had that opportunity to get legal counsel, but you just want to be straight and transparent. And it allows your contract to be more enforceable if the other side, in fact, had an attorney.
Yeah.
Not required, but always good. So then the follow up to that is that we have standard contracts. We get contractor agreements or employment agreements, if applicable, with the team. And the layer on top of that creates great protection for any company is having policies in place. Now, policies are helpful, like a handbook, to create that commonality in the culture, so everyone knows what are the things, because you say it to Tina and then Tina gets fired and now you got to tell Jane. So having a way to train everyone is good, but from the legal standpoint, having policies is good, because if there's a claim for sexual harassment, there's a social media problem, if you have a policy in place, it's what you can rely on to say we have these measures to protect our team, our artists. So it sounds like you've worked on that. So talk to me a little bit about turnover. How do you deal with ongoing training?
So, we struggled for many years with some turnover for a number of reasons. We, as an earlier company, we didn't have the budget and to pay competitive wages. So we lost some people early on where they could go get a job making more somewhere else. A lot of the early growth of the company were people that were passionate about this specific company, these artists, and then we grew with the company, and that includes myself being here from day one. It was very humble beginnings starting it, and we've built it up into something that is successful now. But being able to pay competitive wages, we're still, even to this day, we're always trying to increase, our benefits packages and things so that we can be more competitive, not just to acquire people up front, but to retain them. So we recently had, for our first time ever, we had a competitor in the music industry poach one of our people, and, they offered to pay them a lot more than we could. And, we encouraged them to make the move because it was the right move for them. And then, we adapted what we needed to on our end. But we do care about our employees and our team, their development. And back to, we really try to think long term. And when you build a network of relationships and you treat people right, they end up in interesting places down the road where, because you were gracious with, how they exited the company, 2, 3, 5 years down the road, they might come back around. And if you maintained a positive relationship, that sets you up for future positive outcomes. And so, I don't believe in burning bridges, and, try to have, anytime someone leaves for any reason, it be as little drama as possible so that we can maintain a positive future.
That's a great tip for just anything that you do in the music business. It's a small but large but very small world when you're in the entertainment field, and you'll run into the same people over and over and over. So, do with that as you wish. So what I would like to do for the last couple of minutes, I really appreciate your time being on this with us. I want to circle back, because at the beginning of our conversation, you had said one of the tactics that you guys had used was to allow people to use your music on their YouTube videos and you would monetize. And you said that, it resulted in sometimes like 6-figure, revenues. That's amazing. So talk about that strategy. If someone else is like, how do I do that? What does that look like? Are you messaging these people? How do you find them? How do they find your music?
So, you need to have your music in Content-I.D. So as a baseline, you need to have, through a distributor or a direct deal with a Content-I.D. company, have your music in YouTube Content-I.D. and have your policy set to monetize, so that if somebody does take your music and upload it, it's going to get automatically recognized as your content with ad revenue coming back to you. But then, people have to know about your music. So, starting from zero, I think that would be, definitely a challenge. We already had a platform with artists and awareness where people knew us. They were coming. In fact, how this really started, the way we embraced that community is we were getting so many emails every week of people asking, "Hey, I'm making a gaming montage video, and I really like Celldweller's song Shut 'Em Down. Can I just use it in my YouTube video?" And we'd respond, "Hey, no problem, you can do that." And we explained how it would work. But after getting 20 of those a week or 50 of those a week, there was a period where we were just getting overwhelmed. We're like, we should just make like a public facing page and show people, here's our policy. You can register with us. So we ask people, let us know who you are and that you're going to credit our music in the description, and then you can use it. And that's a self-serve and self-reported policy. Lots of people use it without doing that. Right. But when possible, we ask people to let us know. So maybe we can follow up with them if we ever need to, or have them on our email list. And so we've just embraced people using our music in that way. Then we put in the description of all of our videos on our YouTube channels, hey, click here to, find out how to use this music in your videos. And then we'd send them to that page. So then all of our uploads were promoting people back to a page where they could see how they could use it. Or that could even lead to them licensing the music as a paid license.
And how many would you say actually resulted in a paid license?
Not nearly as many as use it for free, for sure.
They're like, I can use it for free. Why am I going to pay?
It's hard to say, directly people reaching out to us and licensing things, I'd say, dozens and dozens and dozens. I don't know about hundreds, but 50, 100, something in there. But then the ones that we don't know is some editor was making gaming videos, grew up, got a job at a music licensing company, and maybe that was the reason that company reached out to us and licensed our music. So I feel like you never know where things end up. So be cool with everybody and create those opportunities.
All right. Last 3 questions. So jump real quick into merchandising. Okay. So my little spiel on this is, if you are going to sell merch, understand that if you're going to do order fulfillment yourself and you're purchasing all the stuff, doesn't mean you're going to move it right away. So there are upfront costs. So at what point did you find that this was really a great revenue stream? And then how do you basically, let's start with that. As far as, building out the merchandising side, right? You're making good money from that.
Yeah. So, that's another solid 6-figure annual revenue stream for the company, just the merchandising business. So going back to how I started, the first thing I did before FiXT started, I was Klayton's first employee. Right. And the job that he gave me was to run his merchandise. So there was already some demand. He was stuffing bags himself. And, if a fan ordered a t-shirt, which I was one of those fans, I was a fan of his, I'd ordered a shirt and I'd wait 6 weeks for it to show up because he's an artist and he had his artistic life, and eventually he'd throw it in a mailer and ship it. But when I got that piece of the process, I streamlined it, wanted good customer service. Let's ship this out, within a day. Let's simplify the process, make it a good customer experience, increase repeat customers coming back and spending more. What's
the tactic for that? How do you get more purchases from the same customer?
I mean, we've build an ongoing relationship with our customers. So we want to, add them to our email list, follow up with them. We have automated, abandoned cart emails and, post-purchase thank you emails. And we really try to nurture that relationship. So starting with socials, but then if they come purchase something, we want a really fun interaction with them. We have some really fun receipt emails. So we've even seen people when they get our receipts, will go post a picture of their receipt on socials because we have fun with the verbiage and the language where it's not just like a boring receipt, but it's a funny message. Right. So we just try to engage in a cool way with fans. But then building demand is one thing. Really the merch demand follows the music demand. So we've got to get an artist where fans are listening to them. They've got a listener base, and then trying to convert them into customers. But then once we built up, a customer base, we're keeping, just like we try to have consistent music releases, we want consistent merchandise releases where we can feed that fan base. And we've done everything from, screen print, cut and sew, custom things, dye sublimation, all over prints. And then eventually, most recently, we've just started getting into more of the print on demand side. And we avoided that for years because the quality wasn't great and it was really expensive. And we have finally found some partners where the quality is on par with screen printing. Okay. And the prices are actually affordable. So that allows us a lot more flexibility. So a brand new artist on the roster that doesn't have a base yet can have a piece of merch up on the store, where a new fan, the perception to them is this artist is already doing great. They have merchandise, and even if we haven't sold any yet. But one person wants to buy a t-shirt, we can print it on demand, ship it to them. They have a great experience, and we're empowering new artists to grow their merch business a little easier than the old days. It's like you can't even start printing merch until you want to commit to 48 or 72 items, and then if you're sitting them on a shelf and they're collecting dust, you're out the money and nobody's getting them.
Yeah, in the same kind of marketing thinking, with merchandise, will tell artists and new business owners, right? So if you are going to have merch, love it. Start with a website like Threadless or Printful. So they take pretty much all the money. You'll get like $3 a shirt, but they're going to have you upload the things. They host the store. They do full order for film. You do nothing. And then when you find that there's demand, guess what? It makes sense for you to a limited run of 100 shirts because you're going to move them. And then you could start making real money. So see what the demand is and then go from there. All right. So really helpful information. Thank you for sharing. Number 2, when it comes to your guys' biggest competition, do you have another label out there, or would you name another label that is similar to what you're doing that you deem to be competition?
So we work in very, particular niches, as you mentioned when you introed me, electronic rock, synthwave. There are labels that do some of those. I won't bother mentioning some of them. But, the response we get from artists that have worked with some of our competitors are that, we have fairer deals. They can get a hold of us. We respond. Our artist roster, when they're signed with us, they have 40 plus hours a week access, real-time access to our team in a private Discord server where they can message our team. So we make ourselves very available. I'd say what we really compete with, I feel like probably more so than other labels, is artists just being independent. So artists are more empowered than ever to be independent. There's better distribution platforms, self-serve, whether that's a TuneCore or DistroKid where they can keep 100% of their revenue paying, an annual fee or something, or working with a Symphonic or a 1RPM or some of these label service distributors where they may have a baseline tier, but if you want some services where they're pitching, maybe they're giving marketing advances, they do label services, and they're going to take a bigger cut, of course, but the artist could retain ownership. So we fully educate people that there are options out there, and we encourage some artists that approach us about working with us that we might not be the right fit for them, but you can do a lot of this on your own. You're more empowered than ever to do so. But we want to work with artists where we're bringing enough value to them that they need a team, and it's a fit for both parties, that it's mutually beneficial.
Oh, yeah. And that's why I'll say all day long, I'm very much about artists building themselves, thinking of themselves as businesses, maybe even becoming their own label. But when you are thinking about partnering with a potential label like FiXT, you have an opportunity to be plugged into this system. So as we were going through and talking about marketing and merchandising, they've done the work. What they'll throw you on the initial playlist, they'll do some of the help with the marketing and helping to get your shirts up. And so not having to do all that is so valuable to artists that going in and giving away, a portion of the revenue makes sense because now you are partners. And so then the consideration becomes, what's the percentage that you're giving up? So when you have a more, and I don't even want to use the word fair, but fair opportunity, like a 50-50, pretty cool. All right, so last question. So being a 7-figure business owner baddie, what is the kind of mentality that you have today that you didn't have, let's say, back when you guys started this in 2006, from how you work out to how you sleep to, are you a different person or do you do different things?
I'd say I'm definitely a different person. While also feeling like I'm exactly the same person. But, really shifting some thinking in the last few years. I was fortunate a couple of years ago to do an executive coaching, year-long program. And, starting this from the ground up, there wasn't somebody, just showing me the ropes along the way. There were some mentors and people that helped along the way, but I really had to do a lot of development myself. So, I read a lot of books, a lot of business books, a lot of development, personal development. And then this executive coaching program that I did really has helped shift my mindset to, some new ways of thinking, and that there was many, many years. I mean, probably the first 15 out of 17 years where as we grew people, everybody reported to me. And at one point I found like, I'm the bottleneck now. I can do anything and everything. I understand how everything works, but I'm actually bottlenecking things. And I had 15 people reporting to me. And I was like, I'm dealing with more just management stuff than growing the business. So we have structured, some new very key hires in the last few years. We've been able to hire in people at a higher level of experience and, a higher caliber of talent. So we can trust that, I can delegate. Learning just the power of delegation has been a long time coming. But we have, 2 directors under me, and then we have multiple department managers under them, where I'm not spread so thin. And really the shift I've made over the past year is now I can work, this is the cliche phrase, but I can work on the business instead of in the business. So I've been moving out of day-to-day operations and working on higher level strategy, new business development. We've done a lot of refining processes and systems. And those are things that prior to the last few years, it was just, I was stuck in the fray of the whirlwind of just the day-to-day busyness, and really feel like I've been able to, move to that next level of getting out of that chaos.
And it's not easy for some people. It's a control thing. They want to stay in the chaos because they can control things. And usually we all feel like no one's going to do this job better than we did because we fucking built this from nothing. And it probably is true. And so that's part of the problem. And even if you're not the control freak, it's just difficult because we've had the same mental framework for so long. And so it's difficult to be like, if I work less, I'm doing something wrong. But to be really successful, and even to get now to that next milestone financially with whatever the goals are you have for your company, it's going to require you to continue evolving as a business owner, how you spend your time, right? What nonsense you get, involved with versus what is delegated to someone else. And it sounds like it took you a little while to get through that, as it is for all of us. Yes. But I agree with everything you're saying.
Yeah. And it's for wherever I'm at now, I know this is still just the midway of the journey. I've got a lot more to learn, but I'm excited to keep growing and scaling the business and growing more artists. So the future is bright.
And for FiXT, do you imagine that you guys will ever sell? Right? So sometimes we sell a label because it gets to a certain profitability and this and that. What's the vision for FiXT?
So, Klayton and I, we've never really set out over the years with the intent to sell. And, it's an artist-owned label. Klayton owns the label. We have built this, into something of significance now. But, I have no plans of going anywhere else or retiring early. Like, this is what I love doing. So I want this to be where I continue to work for an extended period of time. And, really we want this to be what Klayton can retire on, that the revenue of the label continues to generate. And it is, what all of his musical projects flow through. So it sustains his career, his artistic career. So, there's no current plans to sell anything. Who knows what the future could bring? I've seen enough now that I wouldn't ever say that I don't think it could happen, but it's not even on the radar.
Yeah, and as a final kind of nod to just your guys' success and just congrats on everything that you've built together, the fact that you can stay in a business and partnership with someone for, coming up on 20 years, right, is amazing. It's really difficult for a lot of people at some point. You're always going to run into problems and personality conflicts and just stuff comes up. It's life. But if you can work through those things and you can have meaningful agreements and conversations, you stick it out, and then that's how you focus on just the business and you don't get stuck in litigation and this and that. So the fact that you guys are doing that on like a personal and business level, amazing. So congrats on all that. James, thank you so much for doing this with me. I just feel like, people are taking notes right now as they're watching, as they should be. So you're amazing. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Krystle. It's great to be here.